А еще раз можно музыку сыграть?
Can you play some more music?
Нет, не сыграют.
I'm afraid they won't.
Было две причины,
There were two reasons why I asked for more music. Once, because the Ryazan government was coming in, being a deputy member of Duma from that region, I had to do it. And secondly, I wanted to apologize for this delay. I must apologize to the second half of the audience who are unfortunately absent, having failed to enter. I don't know about you, I was personally searched by a police sergeant just now. So were you? I'm sure he enjoyed searching you more than he enjoyed searching me. But isn't it symbolic that a forum devoted to Gaidar begins with personal searches by police sergeants? What evidence it is of the fact that we've reached the actual outcomes we hoped for? And hence, we need to discuss public administration. This session, after all, is devoted to public administration. As far as I remember past forums where police sergeants weren't asked to conduct personal searches and the room was full, so past forums were marked by the fact that Alexei Kudrin said the most important reform we need is public administration reform. Replacing public administration systems is the favorite theme of so many people. However, none of them are capable of saying what changes are needed. Mostly everyone asks for money. And more money. For instance, a governor's effectiveness is judged by how much budget funding he can obtain. A minister's effectiveness is judged by how much funding they can obtain from the finance ministry. And the finance minister's effectiveness is judged by the fact that he can say we have no more funds. We all say that the important goals of this government is improve living standards, improve health and education. But as to ways of doing it, everyone says we need more money. Today, with Tatiana Golikova and Andrei Silonov here, I ought to shut up and allow them to speak. However, there is one thing I want to say. So many opinion polls are conducted with findings that taxpayers are willing to pay more tax as long as they know for sure that the revenues will be used for improving health, education, etc. So I always said I have always been saying these polls ought to include one more question. Are you willing to pay tax if you know for sure that the funds will be spent on improving health, education, etc. However, their standards won't improve? I'm sure what the answer would be. So today we want to look at the current public administration model from the perspective of how efficient government spending is. Some people say we have little money, some people say we have less. I think we have a lot of money. The key problem is how effectively we spend it, how effectively we administer spending, and who decides what the investment climate should be
The
police sergeant who conducted a public search of this lovely lady, or other people. We tend to give the floor first to the finance minister, and then Tatiana Golokova says what she thinks about it. So we'll change the order today, and we'll ask Tatiana Golokova, the president of the accounting chamber, to present us with her view of the effectiveness of public administration model we have at present, and perhaps make proposals as to whether it needs to change, to be changed, what changes are needed, if at all. We have three issues for discussion, and we'll conduct a little poll here as well. You'll be able to press a button and express your opinion in a democratic way, so that the opinion will not only be presented by the representatives of the government, but also by the people as represented in this room. Tatiana Golokova has the floor. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'll start from the main thing, an analysis of the current public administration system. And I want to say that our resources allowed us to conduct a 4-year study of the interaction of public administration and public spending efficiency. I'll tell you that we only analyzed 53 public administration entities, including 16 ministries, 19 departments, and 18 agencies. Please show slides 1, 2, and 3.
For convenience of perceiving the material, we analyzed the data for 2012-16, and the 16th is the last. Now we don't have correct data on the 17th. 373,000 people performed the function, and this is 72% of the total number of the positions, and they administered 8.6 trillion rubles, or 66.9% of the federal budget spendings. I will remind that the decree of President set 3 levels of public administrations, and in 2016 the functions of public services were performed by 2 departments out of 19 and 3 agencies out of 18, and the functions of oversight and control were fixed by 8 ministers out of 16 and 5 agencies out of 18. In 2016, it was 10 ministers and 4 departments. So, in fact, they rejected from the main principle of public administration. And the systematization of functions performed in 2004 was accompanied by differentiations in compensation size and the environment, transport, connections and benefits. And within the functions of this, there appear different contradictions in financing. Please show the 4th slide. Significant number of size. The difference lies in performing the functions. There was formed the network of different agencies which perform public services. There appeared organs, seven function within territorial branches. Some don't have these territorial branches. In fact, they are interface between the ministries and offices which are in jurisdiction of this, and that gives us grounds to put the question about predictability of these agencies. As a variant, we may speak about agencies which are included into the ministries as the structured units, or they are independent ministers and committees, and the network of territorial branches is transferred into state-run entities, which may be charged with public services, or agencies having no territorial organs may be shifted into state-run entities, and they will be devolved with the functions which used to be performed by the agencies. The total number of the functions and authorities was increased, and it was 4,350 different public services. It looks that we have to return to the beginning of our discussions, and we have to define the main principles of division of state management, including this maintaining the triple-level state structure. Next, organization of oversight and control. We have 1 million audits. Different organizations provide 78% of all these audits. With this number of audits, we've identified 59.5% of failures, of violations. With this number of violations, so in fact this figure, 59.5%, was identified. Look at the last line of this slide. So violations which really made harm for the economy, it's not more than 2% of all violations. And then exception is this federal tax inspection, which is the most efficient according to all indicators. One of the reasons of the state is that just jurisdiction of these organs. We think that we have to put the question about the changing of jurisdictions of 14 departments having territorial branches, and we have to speak about the services of these organs. So for those who don't have it as a core function may be left in jurisdiction of the ministries.
Since these latter have the best understanding of the current legislative loopholes. As you know, the State Duma is now considering a new draft law on oversight and control in the Russian Federation, which proposes to use a targeted approach to organizing oversight and control. However, it doesn't set criteria for risk establishment and management. As to the public administration and management by ministries, as you will know, the ministry's main goal is to achieve targeted goals, and only some of them provide reports on their achievements, and only most of them have failed to meet all targets. A similar characterization is typical of government agencies. According to 16 ministries' reports, out of 38.9% of targeted goals have not been reached, which is a considerable lack of policy outcomes. In other words, what we have is a lot of targets and very low efficiency of meeting them. The assessment of entrepreneurial activities and the assessment of the role of public officials in creating favorable entrepreneurial climate is as follows. Goals have failed to be reached in 25 out of 49 targets. That's 51%. The weakest link in the management of public resources is the activity of ministries with low effectiveness of budget spending and a large number of violations. More than 231 billion rubles were misspent. Thus, resources are used, but targets are not met. To resolve this problem, measures have been taken to improve the system of public administration, and the analysis of these measures taken in 2012 to 2016 shows that the number of government entities has grown by 24.8%. Since there are no rules about establishing new entities and branches, their number has doubled. The biggest number of such branches and entities were established in education, science, agriculture, culture, health, and social protection. 16 out of 53 federal departments have made contracts which are really within the authority of central government. The extension of the territorial networks of public administration distort the vertically integrated government structure, and the devolution of powers and authorities to subcontractors erodes state public administration and leads to lower efficiency. In 13 out of 16 federal ministries have branches with a large number of non-specific functions, including those that provide educational and medical services. Thus, 7,174 non-specific entities belong to federal government agents. We have already proposed that they should be shifted to more relevant jurisdictions, but it has failed to be done. On the other hand, strict centralization of higher education, irrespective of their specific of disciplines they study, may decrease their efficiency. The main problem is that non-specific entities are not properly controlled by the agencies they report to, which leads again to a low efficiency of public spending. You will see that the example of education spending is shown on slide 9. On the other hand, furthermore, in slide 10, you can see that the education fees charged by state-run and other educational services are considerably different. As of today, this is in direct violation of federal law. On the whole, we have shown that the number of paid services has increased and the incomes are considerable. Paid services become priorities in many state-run entities. In 2014 to 2016, such incomes have grown by 14.1%.
The next problem which exists, it is non-profile directions in training in branch. Look at this slide 12. Please show. Look at the sublines. So demand of the agricultural sector workers is 21.5 thousand, but non-profile specialty of these educational universities, then look at the figures. Non-profile specialists are trained by the academies. Today, it's evident that, in fact, the system of training of personnel in higher education or tertiary education is the absence of the link between the labor market and, in fact, eroding of funding for educational. So the practice of using these resources needs corrections and regulations. We don't speak about the giving up this performance of this law, but still we need to correct. The next topic is during 4 years, we paid big attention to differentiation between different levels of public administration. And now we may give the conclusion. 113 authorities were given to different organs, and this is only 72. In performing these authorities, this 1,060 organs of executive asset take place and 7,429 organs of municipal administration. So we observe the trend for translation of these authorities or devolving these authorities to municipal. So in fact, we lack transparency of organization, especially in the regulation of budget funding. In 2012-2016, we've given more than 1.5 trillion of rubles for devolving authorities, about 330 million of rubles. And these measures that we took during this period, that in fact the volume of this volume is not sufficient, and very often it brings new spending of subjects, and in fact these things must be funded by federal budget. And so this changing of authorities should be fixed. I think that we can optimize the spending of federal budget. We can decrease the personnel. And what we call the ruin, we speak about just fixing the revenues, but we have to speak about changing of authorities between regions and federal center. It's not a secret that we may speak about transferring to federal payment for unemployed people, and then we will devolve authorities to regions, and when the funding is not sufficient, we may provide new tax and non-taxing revenues. But in fact, we didn't systemize these taxes. Now I would ask Andrei Mikhailovich to conduct, perhaps not all people are familiar with this question of dividing the authorities, but I would ask you to ask this question about division of public administration and authorities.
I guess Mrs. Golikova has spoken enough dangerous things. So she wants to share responsibility, I guess. So she wants to ask you the following question. Do we need to make any changes in the current distribution of authority between the federal and regional level? I almost said feudal level. Please press any button on. Please press any button on the control panels you have, just so that we can identify those taking part in the poll. You have seen the question. So you can give the following answers. 1, don't change anything.
Выведено или нет? Выведено. Закрепить за регионы в
2,
качестве собственных делегируемых полномочий с подъемом на
delegate
федеральный уровень платежей
power,
работающего населения.
that's number 2 on the slide.
Федерации части доходов регионов. И
And
закрепить
3,
третий вариант, закрепить
that's number
в качестве
3 on the slide.
в сферах охраны использования лесов, объектов животного мира, охраны здоровья граждан, представления компенсационных и иных выплат с подъемом на федеральный уровень платежей за неработающее население и, соответственно, перераспределение части доходов регионов. Вот
These are the proposed
на самом деле, единственное, перед тем, как вы сейчас начнете отвечать на эти
versions, proposed answers you can give. Before you give your answers, I want to warn you about the following. We have a slightly different format of meeting today. There was a large panel, there used to be a large panel on the stage here, and you listened to their discussion. Now we only have a few people on the stage, but therefore we want to listen to your opinion. So we now want you to answer this question. Should anything be changed in the current system of distribution of authority? As soon there will be a bell as soon as you finish voting. Please start voting. Don't think about the consequences. Give honest answers, your honest opinion on the questions. Mr. Chubais, Rosnano is not really concerned, so you can press any button you like. I pressed 1. I discllosed this secret. Mr. Chubais says nothing should be changed. What's an outcome? The vote times run out. Please show the findings. Okay, I understand your opinion. Mr. Chubais, you are in minority, but you always are. Well, obviously, the majority have voted in favor of charging the federal center with social security for non-working population, which seems to be a very reasonable thing. Mrs. Golikova, I want to ask Mr. Silyanov, do you agree with this? Shall you take it upon yourself? What do you think? Well, in fact, if we are talking about redistribution of authority, exchange of authority, the powers, the functions should be accompanied with the redistribution of spending authority. When a function involves the spending of billions of rubles at federal level, no, you are speaking as if you were a governor. Now, please speak as the finance minister that you are. Say yes, and we'll redistribute the authorities. I cannot give you an unequivocal yes. We need to look at a whole system of measures to clarify the authority of the center and the regions, and especially the sources of funding, so that this authority can be administered at regional or central level. There are very many functions. Mr. Silyanov, okay, Mrs. Golikova wanted to say something. Mrs. Golikova, please continue. I'll go back to this once again. But I wanted to ask you another question. We have some achievements, specifically the size of public servants at federal level. Specifically, the number has been reduced, but especially at the lower levels. which has caused some distortions. The numbers of public servants continues to be large, and there are certain imbalances in their pay. Moral and material compensation is non-transparent. Therefore, there are considerable differences in the compensation of federal services, federal public servants who work in different agencies. Sometimes the difference is as much as three times. We know that the finance ministry is working on this. They have published their proposals for new decrees regulating this area, but we think even that is not enough to resolve the issue. We think we need to change the system of compensation, increasing the number of set salaries and considerable variation of bonuses, making them dependent on efficiency, which would set a good level for compensation in general and create good material incentives for effectiveness. But they would only work in conjunction with the reconsideration of the staffing. And this is my next question. Well, I'm sure, colleagues, everyone will be interested. The second question, do we need to change the current system of public servants' compensation? I'm sure everyone's interested. We have three versions of answers. One, no, we shouldn't. I wonder why the first question is no. The first answer, the first version is no. The second one is yes, but link it to clear indicators of efficiency. And the third is allow agency heads to decide on the number of staff and their pay. So shall we vote? Let's vote. Time is running. Mr. Voskresensky, who is the governor of the Ivanov region, says they could vote for two. Can they vote? Can they give two votes? Of course, he is the governor of Ivanov, known as the city of brides. Okay, so shall we? I understand the answer. Most people are in favor of linking compensation to effectiveness and efficiency. Okay, so most people do not trust agency heads. Okay. We won't ask Mr. Silanov because nothing is going to be changed in public funding.
And I would like to conclude with one more topic, that perhaps we didn't pay much attention to this structure. Please show slide 14. At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that more than 370,000 people are involved in the work, and then 162 as the coordination between the number they work for state funds. And you know that the volume of funding is large, and the spending for their maintaining is 143.8 million rubles. And this 143.5 million are provided by in fact, revenues as the taxes for and that's why we put the question. So, in fact, we speak about creation of uniform information system after administration of security payments will be regulated. And then we have to provide the link between these different organs. And from this connection, we have a risk, we risk perhaps to suggest creation of unified fund that would in fact include all existing institutes. And this unified fund of social security should have a unique management system which will be not in charge of the state but in charge of public, because part of these funds is administered by federal tax inspection. Now we speak about distribution or allocation of these resources, which are considered to be revenues. We consider that this form may be reflected in the civil regulation and code, and that will bring new principles of partnership, private-public partnerships, and that will provide trust from the people. And then I will conclude as for commenting on the results of this vote. In fact, we speak not only about the changing the authorities. Of course, we assume that it's not possible just to increase the payments for non-working population and then make the regional organs to perform it. Of course, we have to reform the system of social security and reform of payments for unemployed population. And that's why we want to conclude with one more question as for interactive voting, which will concern this public administration or which management of this unified non-budget fund. Do you think it's a must? Do you believe an integrated reform of mandatory social insurance is required based on standardized insurance principles? And there are three variants of answer. So you have to think it over, and now you vote. It seems that not all governors vote, so you are very cautious, or just wisdom of some governors. Not all. You know, I monitor, I see all of you. So here we have results.
These results are self-explanatory. Right, there's food for thought for us, Mr. Makarov. Okay, tomorrow we'll be talking about adjusting the tax system, where Mrs. Golikova will say a few more dangerous things. I want to thank you for your attention and leave this podium. Thank you, Mrs. Golikova. Dear colleagues, I think it's the right time for asking Anton Silanov to say a few words. Mr. Silanov, I'm sure you're aware of all these concerns and all these facts, but it seems that the trend is wrong, or the work is wrong, or something is wrong, and no one is held responsible. The growth of state-run entities seems to account for lower unemployment rates, which is a fortunate thing, of course. But given our topic of the efficiency of government spending as a reflection of effectiveness of public administration,
ощущение такое, что вот с деятельностью
I have a feeling that
может быть, вы тогда
this
сейчас
effectiveness is not all that good.
по цифрам, что у нас происходит.
Mrs. Golikova's figures have presented a complete picture. It seems that we devolve authorities to regions, regions devolve authorities to municipalities, but municipalities have no resources to fulfill these functions. However, what the functions being devolved are the most important to the people. So what's wrong? Do we have a wrong model? Do we have a shortage of resources? Do we have a weakness of efficiency? Where are the worst weaknesses concentrated? Mr. Siluanov, you're welcome. Mr. Siluanov usually speaks before Mrs. Golikova. Now they've changed roles. What an interesting thing. I'm not going to criticize Mrs. Golikova, which she usually does after my reports. I'll follow my own script. Are you going to agree with the fact that we do have resources? In fact, today's topic concerns public administration. I won't speak about numbers, personnel, compensation, etc. However, because this topic is generally a very important one and a very broad one, the system of public administration at federal or regional level, public administration, management, governance often determine outcomes both the state and in a private organization, and the efficiency of resource use, and the targeting, the tools, the administrators, the tasks will often determine the effectiveness of public administration. In fact, Mr. Makarov just said that some agencies and departments and regional authorities are mainly involved in trying to squeeze more funds out of central government. And in fact, this is not as important as having a good public administration system capable of using less resources to greater efficiency. That's why it's so important to speak about the mechanism of public administration. In fact, the efficiency of public spending is, in fact, a mirror of the effectiveness of public administration. And in generally, they reflect the effectiveness of the state machine in general. Whether the state is generally capable of performing its function. It's really an important factor of state competitiveness. Many countries are paying a lot of attention to increasing their competitiveness through improving the efficiency of resource spending, which is achieved through creating an effective mechanism of developing and implementing policy. That's one of the more important tasks today. People tend to say that the effectiveness of public administration is based on two pillars: functional efficiency and operational efficiency. Functional efficiency is, as a rule, what tasks were set, whether these tasks are correct and whether their administration is correct. Operational effectiveness concerns the management, public management, aimed at achieving policy goals in an organization or in the government as a whole. So setting the goals and targets is the most important thing. as well as deciding what implementation mechanisms should be used. To define the public administration effectiveness, three indicators are used. The first indicator is the target, the strategic goal, and the relative targets. The administrators, or in other words, the departments and agencies responsible for reaching those targets, and finally, how the targets are reached. And when we understand how a target should be reached, what tools and resources should be involved in reaching those goals is as important as the first two. Of course, as I will say again, you can be efficient without major resources if you have good systems.
Very often we have this problem both on federal and municipal level. If we speak about this, what are the targets? What are our highest targets? And in fact, they are defined by the decree of the presidents, May decree of the 2012. And these targets could bring to the special measures and instruments as different programs, and all these targets must be structured for every administrator, for every person or public servant. Of course, we could look at the numbers, at the number of staff, but if we build this clear system of targets, beginning from the highest level to going to bottom of this hierarchy, then perhaps we will not need the money that are required. So we have a lot to do. It concerns both federal level and the subjects of federal Russian Federation. We repeatedly speak about different federal programs, state programs. Now we have new projects, but quite recently we debated that state programs are not efficient. The answer is very simple, because we don't use this instrument, we don't implement this instrument effectively. Very often state programs do not correspond the targets, and in fact they are eroded. There are some dozens of different targets in these programs, and if you ask the administrator what targets are implemented by specific organs, nobody knows, because we have hundreds of different targets, and the way we formulate the task and the target will define the efficiency of the work and the main directions of the current activities. But what we have, we adopt the program, we have a lot of indicators, nobody responsible for implementing this program. Some person is responsible for indicators, some are responsible for reporting to federal administrators. And that's what we need to do now. We try to do it now. We reduce the number of targets and aims. We define the volume of funding. We have project offices. But what we need is just to make the instruments efficient so that they could were connected with specific targets. We have very few in fact, strong requirements and targets. What we need to do, we need to restructure the program. just taking into account just 5, not more targets. So concrete funding, people who are responsible, looks like everything is simple, but unfortunately it's not implemented and it doesn't work. If we speak about what to do, then the highest level of the targets, which was formed by the President's decree in the strategy of social economic development, in fact, is not being implemented. You know, that strategy, along with the strategy, we have more than 400 other documents. We have the law on strategic planning, and it includes also the number of strategic documents. Yes, they are developed, we have them, but what is the outcome? Unfortunately, no outcome and no effect, because, in fact, these documents do not correspond the targets which were set in the decree of the presidents, and they do not correspond to the funding that is available. And that's why the program was developed under different circumstances. Now we have different framework for work. All these things brings us to the situation when some management decisions are not realized, are not implemented, and even formulation of these management decisions do not correspond to real situation on the one hand, and on the other, even if it is defined correctly, then it is not translated to the level of organs or ministers or departments which are responsible for performing this. So this is the problem. If we look at the state programs, yes, we have a lot of indicators. They are defined in the number that, in fact, it's not possible to remember all these indicators. Even the number of organs, it's more than 30 organs. How could we coordinate the work? How one organ must coordinate all these 30 organs. In fact, it doesn't work. And mainly it concerns the budget management. The resource that is assumed in the programs is not coordinated. There is no changing of different allocations or increasing efficiency of the budget. Nothing happens. Unfortunately, budget process is so difficult. Very often, we have the volumes of funding that the state possesses. For example, in healthcare, it's only 66%, because we have a number of healthcare established entities that are not included into this program, because the Ministry of Healthcare has to coordinate all the complex and the block of entities within this ministry, but we don't observe it. And in education, 73%. So I could give more examples. So the question who, how, and in what way, these are the key questions for increasing efficiency of activity and targeting. Operational efficiency, this is also important.
Operational effectiveness is very important, but it's even more important to ask heads of regions to say what they think and ask questions that you might be able to answer. You spoke so brilliantly about various problems that the implementation of state programs has, but you never mentioned whether there is relevant funding. All I want to say is that effectiveness, the root of effectiveness, it's not resources that lie at the root of effectiveness, but the quality of public administration processes.
Это точно.
That's for
Спасибо,
sure.
коллеги. Давайте поблагодарим Антона Германа.
Let's
Тем более он просто оставил время для дискуссии какой-то. Спасибо огромное.
thank Mr. Sulanov for leaving us time for a discussion. You understand, Mr. Sulanov, that I couldn't have interrupted Mrs. Golikova. And now, heads of regions are welcome to attack the finance minister. I don't recommend you to attack Mrs. Golikova. But before we do that, let's ask Mr. Kuzminov for a conciliatory statement. Mr. Kuzminov, do you want a mic? To make the process more efficient, only a few things. Primarily, in connection with what Mrs. Golikova has said, the three-level government public administration system, the three-level public administration system. Fortunately, I have a very lightweight gadget. Obviously, some of the agencies are really only an interface between ministries and agencies, and these agencies should be eliminated or merged into ministries. We have funding in many sectors that goes directly to targeted entities, so we don't need any mediators. Some other agencies can be replaced with effective programs and tools. As to oversight and control, these entities are very important. At this time, we have a lot of entities that exercise control and oversight. They are formally separated from ministries, whereas in fact, they come under their jurisdiction. They need to be made independent and concentrated in areas that are especially important for the health and the quality of life of taxpayers. All the others should be returned to the ministries formally. Another subject which Mrs. Golikova has raised, and a very important topic, which has been clearly discussed for the first time, is the growth in the number of entities, departments and offices. It's the backside, the reverse side of our inability of creating effective long-term projects and programs and to delegate program directors' rights, implementation rights. In fact, we fail to trust such people and overwhelm them with control and oversight, which reduces the whole system to creating a new institution, a new entity with staff structure and hierarchy. We should remind ourselves that institutions are only tools. The weak institutions should be eliminated. We don't need to preserve weak tools. They are not a sacred cow. Government offices and institutions should only be tools, including tools that go to the market. Do you think it's bad, Mrs. Golikova? No, I think it's good when the government performs its activities on the market, as long as these activities are effective. I agree. I think that the government officials should have the right to participate in market organizations or in the oversight of markets. So autonomous government offices should be revived and used as a tool here. But some of the government offices should be replaced with long-term programs, especially in education, health, and social security. This would reduce the number of audits and the resources used for oversight. In fact, Mr. Siluanov, it's very important that direct financial ministry oversight of all subcontractors is excessive. We have a paradox. When a subcontractor wins a tender, a competition, and receives funding to build a specific facility, so instead of overseeing the outcome, we try to control and oversee the spending of funds. That's excessive. What we should target in our audits is the outcomes rather than the process. In fact, we try to oversee what we've already agreed with during the competition. Let's oversee and control the outcomes, the products they create, they produce. Another topic that has not been raised today, and I want to do it, is the system of procurement. State institutions continue to control process and the spending once procurement contracts have been concluded, so that subcontractors have absolutely no freedom of action. That's the best way to achieve the lowest efficiency possible. The new system that has been introduced has taken the responsibility from the official and embedded it into the procedure. If we control the procedure rather than the outcome, we cannot expect officials to be responsible for the outcomes. And that kind of system should be replaced. And finally, I want to speak about the multi-level responsibility. As soon as the legislation was changed on how repair works should be conducted, all subcontractors have refused to approve the projects, leaving us without any product at all. That's a small illustration of what happens in excessive state control. We try to multiply state control and oversight systems, and thus dissolve and destroy the system of responsibility and accounting. We leave officials without any responsibility for the outcomes of their work, thus destroying the efficiency of government public expenditures. I think procurement contracts should be based on effectiveness. We should improve the system of responsibility. It's not agencies that should be held responsible, but specific individuals. Therefore, we should allow long-term public procurement contracts with greater responsibility. And now controls and audits. We need to take more measures there. Some oversight zones need to be changed completely. For instance, fire control is based on risk management. Accreditation of educational institutions based on programs should be replaced with accreditation based on the quality of products. And finally, labor audits should be cancelled altogether. There is a system of legislation under the Civil Code which ought to perform this function so that there is no need for official audits. In other words, some zones of control can be easily replaced with
Даже не знаю.
law enforcement and judicial control. Right. So many important topics.
Передать микрофон.
Will you give the mic to
Как дуаен такой главный.
Rustam Minnikhanov, President of Tatarstan? You are the eldest senator here, the eldest governor here.
Первое.
Please tell us what you think about a triple system of government. We have obviously been watching its inefficiency and ineffectiveness. The current system of control is also weak in terms of control objects. The correlation between functions and funding is weak too. Oh, everyone has their own opinion, I'm sure, including the devolution of authority. Everyone's voted in favor. I voted against. The reason why is that, well, Natalia Komarova here, whenever we devolve authorities, we lose sources of funding. More funding is withdrawn than is provided as soon as devolution happens. So you've had some more resources, I know that. Yeah, as chairman of a committee, please give us 5 years to work under the current system. Over 5 years, I'll be able to understand what our revenues can be. Another question, real estate. Withdrawals and benefits from income tax revenues. So the greatest need is as follows. Where would they gain all those resources? So clearly, interests come into conflict. If I were Mr. Silanov, I would withdraw funds under central control. I understand his motives very well, but our request is as follows. If we have no incentives for growth, if we have no motivation for creating jobs, if we have no motivation for increasing the efficiency of companies, we won't do it. Secondly, I've been a member of government since 1996. I witnessed many reforms and I was involved in them. It's very hard to evaluate the effectiveness of a public official at municipal level. There are targets, there are stimulation measures, etc. I remember going to Singapore to study their best practices. But I think that there are greater losses in other fields. As soon as we begin to reduce the number of agencies, we have more entities at lower level. Or look at public services. They begin to earn income instead of serving the public. Medical services, especially high-tech medical services. In any case, on the other hand, we do need to increase our income sources. For instance, sports centers. We set the number of hours schools can use, and then we tell them to earn their own income during the remaining time. So it's flexible. The important thing is a strictly defined system. As far as construction work is concerned, I cannot agree with Mr. Kuzminov. In fact, the only
Коллеги, вот сейчас вот просто выдающиеся
crazy funding that we have
денег, кроме бюджета, нет.
is budget expenditures. Anyone can write a feasibility study. The same facility can be built for 10 million, for 100 million rubles. So we have adopted standards that are crazy. Why does a small village, need a huge school building or a kindergarten? They don't. Fire defense, firefighting amounts to 10% of the costs of a facility generally. Why do we need such expensive fire protection facilities? So we need a good responsible system of establishing prices and costs. Public procurement needs to be centralized. At this time, every small government funded office conducts its own procurement. If you centralize this procurement, will definitely save a lot of money. For instance, I've been watching again and again when expensive equipment is procured without buying the materials needed for its smooth operation. So what we need is not buy equipment. We need to watch how many public services this equipment can be used in providing. And something else is we need a system that would run for at least 5 years to if we are to be able to establish its effectiveness, or capital construction and repairs. Subcontractors are chosen at federal level. Why does it happen? We in the region know them much better. Each facility, each building, we know what it needs, what repairs it needs, and how much money it may cost. And we know it much better at regional level than federal authorities might ever know. We have 85 regions. They're all different. I am sure that some proposals and systems would be good for some of the regions, but not for all. If you were asked to answer this question, 5 years of no change. No. My question is, should we make changes first and give you 5 years? Or should we refrain from changes now? Refrain from changes. It's best not to alter anything. There are no miracles. Where would Siluanov find 600 billion rubles? He'll make us part with the funds. That's it. Thank you. So don't change anything. At last, regional heads have agreed with heads of commercial business companies. They want the government not to disturb them. As far as authorities and functions, all regions are capable of implementing their authority and performing their functions. If the region provides poor public services, then you should replace the governor You cannot run everything out of Moscow. We have a huge country. Your central authorities recommend governors. Don't disturb them in performing their duties. Thank you.
So please, Natalia Komarova. So I'm a representative of Khanty-Mansiysk region. As for the things that was mentioned, I want to add, I also voted against all changes and manipulations with authorities. There is one more aspect that I would like to reveal. I stand for the reforms and possibility of changing responsibilities, but in case we reject some principle of state authorities. In this case, yes, but if we don't change simultaneous reforms, then I'm strongly against all these manipulations. Nothing will happen because we have one budget, it is known, we have some indicators and parameters, and whoever possesses this funding, and we understand that then let's look at some concrete things. For example, so three-level system of ministries, some oversight and control functions, these agencies and departments. And so what do you think about this? It's evident that ministry works and all other entities just simulate independence. Do you see these representatives of the ministers in the regions? Would you like to maintain this system? No, this should be changed. This should be changed. Then the second. So you were the chairperson of the committee in the State Duma, so it's not possible just to interfere with me. The next question, the state program that was mentioned by Siluyanov. State programs do not work. So it's more indicators, and so one target has so many indicators that the final function is not to be able to check or to audit. That's why all regions want to be a part of this state program, but they are not interested in the results. Should we change this system? Yes, we need to change. So we mentioned two things. The first, to change the system of public administration of state and to change the level of or three-level structure of the government. Then you say that we have to keep everything, but I mentioned only authorities. I don't want to change authorities. But, you know, we don't have the state programs. May I just say, we don't have state programs. We have just a set of authorities or set of entities. In order to calculate how it will affect or impact the indicators, then we don't have resources. In fact, we don't have the instruments to assess or to evaluate the efficiency. Not, for example, the program of capital repairing. So do you have the addresses of these buildings? Is it the state program? Of course not. So in this respect, it must be changed. And this is just the reason why I'm for this changing, as for authorities and three-level structure. So when we just built these reforms, we have different targets. Now, in regions, in fact, we have two levels of management. We don't have agencies. We have ministers and just offices. And parallel to it, there's oversight and control agencies. But now oversight and control offices, in fact, are independent. Now we think about concentration of all this function in one office. So that's what I was going to say. And then I have another question. If I'm not mistaken, your consolidated budgets, you know the figure, 160 million, and your salary is 4 times less than another region. So I want just to ask the question, and who must decide this question? As for the legislation of the state, then it's in competence of regional authorities, and we have to think it over. It's really interesting. I will deliver this message to my colleagues, so we have state support. So, of course, it's not very comfortable for me just to ask for somebody, but still I want to emphasize one more thing. So what authorities should be rejected? It seems to me that this is the most important question. Manipulating does not make any sense. We have to think of the things that we have to give up.
Mr. Makarov, my colleagues, I've listened to this very attentively, and it's very important to be thinking about effectiveness and efficiency. It's important to think about targets. It's important about the right indicators and the right programs. But we keep forgetting about the most important thing. It's the staffing. What's the reason why Tatarstan is pleased with everything? They've been developing their personnel. They've been learning from Singapore. They've been learning from best practices. I suspect that a lot of inefficiencies come at regional and municipal level is rooted in the fact that there are no people capable of performing their tasks efficiently. And the recent history when we have replaced programs with offices and offices with programs, the problem has been that in the people, in who is implementing this. In fact, I believe that we should look at past history, we should look at ourselves, and we should look at our people. The root is the quality of our staff. We'd better think about improving staff development, improving the system of disseminating best practices, and so on. Otherwise, we'll keep committing the same errors again and again, and being punished for this again and again. And these errors will be committed by the same people who are not trained, who are not willing, and who are not able to perform their functions. I think that the root of all changes is the people. It's not processes, it's not indicators. It's people who are either capable or incapable of performing their functions. So when we discuss changes, when we discuss public administration systems, we should concentrate on who is going to perform this. So you believe that nothing should be changed until we choose the right people. Did you say, does it mean we should replace ministers? I'm not in great favor of duplicating the Soviet system. But under the Soviet system, there were training programs, universities, and courses that were charged with disseminating best practices. Saying that we are meeting in a university, it's very important to speak about the role of education and training. My small experience as a governor tells me that it all goes down to human error, human inefficiencies, and human problems. Whatever the system is, the important thing is to perform tasks and achieve outcomes. The question is, who is going to do it? So whose fault is it? What should we replace all the people we have today? Which people should be replaced and how? Who are the people that should come in their stead? I think the main problem lies at municipal level. So state programs don't work. Three-level public administration system doesn't work. So we should start changes at municipal level by replacing people there. Yes, we should start with people who are responsible for building a specific school building or a specific kindergarten. Secondly, where do we need the most relief? We need to be relieved of too much regulation of our systems. I know best how many people should perform fire defense and how many computers I need in a specific office. This is something that should be brought to a conclusion. In Novgorod, we need at least 500 million rubles. And if Novgorod is just a small percentage of the country's economy, if we multiply this sum, look at the resources. Thirdly, I may not be correct, but shouldn't we be thinking about the fact that currently regions are suffering under the Soviet legacy with Of course, model-based budgeting is a good step forward, but there are 4 or 5 different types of regions with 4 or 5 types of different problems. We should take into account these peculiar features of different regions when we do the budgeting and when we plan public administration's changes. That was the Andrei Nikitin, governor of Novgorod region. It's time's running out, as you can understand, so please remember that when you speak. But here's a governor of Ryazan, which is my own constituency. So I want to ask my questions to Nikolai Lyubimov, governor of Ryazan region. So the subject of people, staffing, the development of personnel. It's true that all regional operations are regulated at federal level. If we look at regional budgets and the regulation of regional budgets, the best-intentioned regulation of regional budgets, after all, federal ministers know best. But if federal ministers continue to regulate regional budgets, there won't be enough resources ever. So as far as the Ryazan region is concerned, what's your opinion? Well, in a response, I think it would be best if federal ministers are staffed with people who have had experience of working at regional level. Okay, we are already doing it. And finally, what Mr. Minikhanov and Mr. Travnikov have said, it's true that we have this 2-key rule when governors are consulted when tax benefits are introduced. But the introduction of new standards and regulations, for instance, the Transportation Ministry has just issued a decree that bridges should be categorized in terms of safety. And a lot of funding resources should be spent to provide the security of bridges. For instance, Ryazan is supposed to spend 2.5 billion rubles, which is a large proportion of its budget, to carry out this ministerial decree. And such decrees come in dozens. This system should be changed. We should ask regions first, adopt regulations after. You should ask regions first, are these rules effective? Are they going to be efficient? what Mrs. Komarova said about a triple-level system, what Mrs. Golikova said about eliminating the triple-level system, about merging non-budgetary funds. I'm definitely in favor of this. And as far as personnel development is concerned, as for inventing a country-wide system of personnel development, I know that some of the regions already have systems of personnel development with training programs for municipal officials. It's a costly operation, but it's very important, and we're going to institute this system in Ryazan. You need to prepare training courses for regional ministers and officials. This system is important because it reveals the people who are willing to develop themselves and help them in doing it.
You know, now we are going to give the floor to Anatol Boris Chubais. That would be a big mistake not to give the floor, and then we have to find a person who will be blamed for everything that goes on. So, you know, Andrei Mikhailovich always just looks at me, then I have to add a few words to the topic. Though I would like just to look at historical perspective around the problems that are in the center of discussion. I would suggest to look at just problems during 15, 17 minutes in terms of just correlation between authorities and coordination. So early 2000s, so we just met with just very different situation when the state contradicted the constitution. Then, in fact, authorities had no limits. And in fact, there were representatives of governors, and we didn't have this vice presidents for regionals. Some process took place. First of all, this humanization and harmonization of legislative system. Thanks God, we do not face the problem of early 90s nowadays in legislation. There's increasing of this legal system and possibility to impact all the decisions. In fact, every question could be solved during 24 hours, not just consulting the governor. But that brought us to fundamental changing of distribution of authorities. So we didn't face it for 15 years. This is the process, in fact, not homogeneous. I wouldn't paint it with one color. So I would say that, in fact, we observe the system of improvement, the state. Now we don't have this threat of breaking the system, and of course it's positive result. But as it often happens in Russia, in my opinion, in fact, we just developed it to logical extreme. We've moved too far in centralization. We have changed a lot. We moved forward, but I think that, in fact, we've come to very significant decentralization, over-centralization. Of course, we need centralized, of course, we need federal government, but this must be filled with real things. Should we change authorities? Yes, we need. Do we need to fund it? Of course, yes. But I would think twice, because in fact the question is much deeper. The basis is purely political. In fact, this is political structure of the state. And within this structure, In 2018, we have to put forward the topic of restoring Russian federalism. Excuse me for this high-flown speech.
Dear colleagues, our time is running out. Our time is running out. It seems that this discussion could be endless or better not started. For that simple reason that the problems that we're discussing are rather general. And I am afraid I cannot agree that we should start with municipalities. I think that the triple-layer system of public administration is not justified itself. It's, in fact, destroying effective government. So do we need to change it? Everything you've said today shows that we do. However, there is a fear of changes because it seems that all changes result in the best regions losing some of their resources. However, unless we do perform changes, unless we change the currently non-effective, non-operational system of public administration, of the administration of state programs, we have priority programs now, but they will only start working when they take into account, they don't grow from top to bottom, but when they are developed, designed from bottom to top. It's true that our regions are all different. They have different economic situations. They have different social situations, etc. This all should be taken into account, which is not being done today. So I think that the main conclusion we can come to today is that the system of public administration, if only we want to comply with the president's task of bringing up economic growth to more than world average, we really need to change something about the system of public administration. Of course, we need some changes at municipal level, but we also need the changes that Mrs. Golikova and Mr. Siluanov were describing today, as well as some of the participants of this discussion. Even if this, the overall tone is sad, it sets us very difficult tasks. A lot of work is ahead. But I want to conclude with a quote from a favorite novel of all children, The Count of Monte Cristo. It ended in the following quote: "So what's there left to us? To wait and to hope." So what's left to us? To wait and to hope. I want to conclude with the best wishes for the new year. Thank you.